Hey y'all, it's getting close to the end of the year and I've been putting off these last videos because I'm excited about the contents, but I've also been dreading them because I really want to pay tribute to the 84, 74, 84, and 94 years. They're such monumental years. And just when I think I'm done with my list and ready to go, the algorithm throws me a curveball. It's like, hey, don't you remember these highly influential films and music that happen to not be on any of the dozens of comprehensive lists that you've researched? It's frustrating, and I don't want to leave anything out, so that's why they've been being so long, and just keep adding and adding and adding. So let's jump into this 1984 list of movies. Songwriter. It's a Willie Nelson, Chris Christopherson movie from 1984. They basically play an exaggerated version of themselves. They're just songwriters, musicians in Nashville. I remember seeing it when I was younger. A pretty good movie. Leslie Ann Warren, Rip Torn, Melinda Dillon, the mom from A Christmas Story. She just passed away, I think, this year. Next we have Firstborn, which I remember that movie when it came out because it had Peter Weller in it from Buckaroo Banzai and later RoboCop. Kind of freaks me out that RoboCop is like later, like 87, I think. I thought that was an earlier movie. I remember that from my childhood, so. It also has Terry Garr. She just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Corey Haim, rest in peace. Sarah Jessica Parker and Robert Downey Jr. I didn't know he was in that. I don't think I've ever actually seen it. Actually, I've seen parts of it. I'm not sure. I don't really remember it though. It was more of a grown-up movie than a 12-year-old should have been watching, but. Then we have Runaway. It is a Tom Selleck action thriller thing. And it was significant because it was the first major movie that Gene Simmons did. After Kiss took their makeup off, he was free to explore some acting stuff. He plays a really good bad guy. Apparently it has Kirstie Alley in it too. She was a little hottie back in those days. This is way before she was on Cheers. Razor's Edge, that's a Bill Murray movie that he promised to do Ghostbusters in order to get this movie greenlit. Is his first serious acting role. I think he plays, I think I'm confusing it with the Michael Keaton serious movie. That one he's an alcoholic or whatever. I think this is kind of the same thing. He's just kind of a troubled guy, maybe an alcoholic. Obviously, I've never seen it. I haven't seen a lot of these that are on the tail end of the list here, but we have Reckless with Daryl Hannah. She pops up all over the place in 1984. I'll mention her name quite a bit. She'll be on the actor bingo card. Aidan Quinn, Adam Baldwin. I didn't realize Adam Baldwin was in movies that far back. Not a Baldwin brother, to be clear. Then there was a movie called Android with Klaus Kinski. And I don't really know that much about Klaus Kinski, but there's a documentary. He did a lot of stuff. What's the director's name? There's a crazy director, and he was just a crazy actor. He's the dad of Nastasia Kinski, who's all over 1984 too. I'll mention her name many times, but look up Klaus Kinski. There's a documentary about how insane he was. He like pulled knives on people and threatened to kill people that he was in movies with, and some of it was just because I think he was just literally kind of insane, and some of it was his method acting way of doing things. I don't know. It's pretty bizarre. You look at the guy and you could tell he's kind of crazy. Anyway, there was a movie called Windy City with Kate Capshaw. She's in about 5 movies this year. I'll mention her name a lot too. Obviously, the biggest one being Temple of Doom. I had no idea she was in so many movies, especially at that time period before she became Mrs. Steven Spielberg. There was a movie called Irreconcilable Differences, which attracted my attention when I was younger because it had Drew Barrymore in it. She was also in Firestarter that year, and it was after E.T., so she was just on her upswing. She was still real young. Also, Shelley Long, Ryan O'Neal, Sharon Stone. That had to have been an early movie for her. But I've never seen it because it was more of a grown-up movie. I think the parents are getting divorced, and she decides she plays that trope of the young kid that is older, wiser than her age, and she's trying to divorce her parents or something. I don't really remember. There was a movie called Eureka with Gene Hackman and Rutger Hauer. I assume Rutger Hauer's the bad guy. He's always the bad guy. This is when Gene Hackman was still young enough to be an action star. I assume it's kind of an action movie. Also has Teresa Russell, Mickey Rourke, and Joe Pesci. A lot of these movies that have just all-star casts that I've just never heard of. Another one is called Hotel New Hampshire. That Jodie Foster, Beau Bridges, Rob Lowe, Stasia Kinski, Wilford Brimley, who's in everything back then, Wallace Shawn, Seth Green, Matthew Modine, Amanda Plummer. Can you believe that cast? It's just insane. You have Flamingo Kid, which had Matt Dillon in it. And I remember it as kind of more of a grown-up movie too. Matt Dillon, Richard Crenna, Hector Elizondo, Jessica Walter, who's Archer's mom and the mom on Arrested Development. She just passed away last year or this year. Fisher Stevens, Bronson Pinchot. This is before Perfect Strangers. Marissa Tomei, Steven Weber. Insane, right? You had the remake of The Bounty. It was called The Bounty. All of the originals were called The Mutiny on the Bounty. The first one had Charles Lawton playing Captain Bligh. I can't remember who the Christian Fletcher guy was, but the 50s version has Marlon Brando and who was the other guy? Marlon Brando and Clark Gable. But this version is called The Bounty, and it's got Mel Gibson as Fletcher Christian and Anthony Hopkins as Captain Bligh. And I have it on the free YouTube, so I plan on watching it. I haven't watched it yet. I'm sure it's a great movie, but I love the original version. And I'm not sure if I've seen the 55, 56 version. Yeah, I have, because it's got Clark Gable in it. Clark Gable and Marlon... That doesn't sound right. Clark Gable. I don't remember. Whatever. A Secret Honor is a Robert Altman movie with Philip Baker Hall playing Nixon. I assume it's a Watergate thing. Originally it was a play, I think. So it's all just monologue-y kind of thing. You have Moscow on the Hudson. That's a Robin Williams movie I've never seen. Birdie. My dad just watched that one recently. He got it off of TCM. And it's got Nicolas Cage playing a real weird character. And you have some action dudes from that time. Lassiter is a Tom Selleck. And he's got Jane Seymour and Lauren Hutton. There's two hotties from that time period. Weird to think. I think of those as older ladies now, but Jane Seymour was beautiful. She was a Bond girl in the 70s. It was cool seeing her in a lot of stuff. And you had City Heat, which was directed by Richard Benjamin. And he was in a few movies. I didn't know he switched to directing, but he was kind of a B movie actor, so it was cool that he went to directing. But the City Heat is kind of a buddy cop thing with Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds, which is interesting. I'd really like to see that. I've never even heard of it before. You had Iceman was a Jonathan Demme, same year that he did Stop Making Sense for the Talking Heads. In this Iceman movie starring Timothy Dalton. Timothy Hutton. Timothy Dalton, that's the James Bond guy. Timothy Hutton. And they basically find old caveman, literal caveman, and they thaw him out in the ice and bring him back to life, and they trying to learn how to communicate with him. I don't know why. I loved that movie when I was younger. So cool. I thought it was so cool. We got another movie directed by Richard Benjamin called Racing with the Moon, that stars Sean Penn, Elizabeth McGovern, Crispin Glover, Dana Carvey, and Nicolas Cage. Again, just all hotshot young actors. That's I think it's set in like the 50s or 60s or something at a school, and kind of finding themselves and love triangles and what have you. Not really my type of movie, but if I came across it, I would watch it. Seems interesting. Yeah, Muppets Take Manhattan. Muppets aren't really in my wheelhouse, but this one's significant because it's got another actor bingo card guy, Dabney Coleman, who just passed away a few weeks ago, as the bad guy, I assume. He's another one that's just always the best bad guys. You had a movie I haven't... There's another movie called Swing Shift. It's another Jonathan Demme movie that I'd never heard of. Apparently it's the movie that Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell met on. And then they've been married for 40 years since then. Also starring Ed Harris and Holly Hunter. Basically about the World War II, when all the women were working at the factories when the men were overseas fighting the war. Well, it looks like more of a drama. I'm not sure. Actually, I've never seen it, so I couldn't tell you if it's a drama or a comedy. Maybe a dramedy. You have Crimes of Passion with Kathleen Turner when she was still a hottie. But the guy is Anthony Perkins from Psycho, and he has to be like 1,000 years old. I do not want to see an erotic thriller with Kathleen Turner and Anthony Perkins. Actually, before we get into the numbered top grossing, just want to say I usually don't talk about how the sausage is made too much, but I gotta explain a little bit how I do this. I usually go through a top list, whether it's music or movies, and write down all the noteworthy ones that I recognize or I have something I could say about. And then that's usually my list, unless I come up with some extras. Like this whole list that I just told you is all extra stuff that I found from the algorithm. But what I had found was a bunch of 1984 and 1994 Siskel and Ebert episodes where they broke down some of these movies. That's how I know who some of the people in some of these are. Some of them I just had completely left off the list because I didn't recognize the name of it. But once I watched those Siskel and Eberts, I'm like, oh, I got to mention that one because it's got so-and-so in it. I got to mention that one because it's directed by so-and-so. So I would add it, and then I would go back to the list and see what number it was and add it into the list where it goes. And then I'd find more of those videos and watch those Siskel and Eberts and then go back to the list and go, oh, I had that one written down, but it's not, it was on the list. Anyway, I did 2 or 3 rounds of that, and I finally just gave it up and said, I'm going with it. Done is better than perfect. So let's get into the list. We got at 144, top grossing movie of 1984. Got a movie called Garbo Talks. And if you don't know, Greta Garbo was one of the original great silent film stars, and she was one of the very few that was able to cross over into talkies. She was brilliant, and she finally at some point just gave up on Hollywood. She just retired and gave up on Hollywood completely. But this movie doesn't have Greta Garbo in it, but I think it's about that time. It's written and directed by Sidney Lumet, who did a lot of plays and things. So I'm sure this was set up more like a play, or originally was a play maybe. But it's Carrie Fisher, Ron Silver, and Anne Bancroft. I assume Anne Bancroft was probably who plays Greta Garbo. And this would have been her last movie she ever made. She was married to Mel Brooks, and I think she died soon after this. Next we have 143 is a movie called Misunderstood, which is Gene Hackman again and Henry Thomas also from E.T. He was hot, just like Drew Barrymore was after E.T. And once again, I think he was one of those young kids that are wiser and smarter than their age. Next we have a really somewhat important movie called Paris, Texas, that I've always heard of. I watched it on YouTube, and like a lot of great movies, it's long and boring. Really great cinematography of just long, boring shots of the characters thinking and driving and landscape, and the only thing that makes it bearable is the soundtrack by Ry Cooder. It's so good. It's one of those artsy-fartsy kind of movies. Basically, Harry Dean Stanton, another Actor Bingo alumni. He's in 5 movies in 1984. But he basically wandered off one day, and he just wandered around in the desert for 5 years. Who knows how he stayed alive, but one day his brother, Dean Stockwell, pulls up and is like, holy crap, where you been? And he takes him back, and he's got a son with a woman who is Nastasia Kinski. I want to get a bell that I can ring whenever I do the Actor Bingo. People that are just in every movie of the year, I just want to bing, ring the bell. So Nastasia Kinski and It's, like I said, the cinematography is great. It's a study in lighting and atmosphere and all of that filmmaker stuff, but if you're looking for action, it's not this movie. Moving on, we got 136 is Stranger Than Paradise. It's a Jim Jarmusch movie. Again, it's got to be one of his first, if not his first movie, but Jim Jarmusch makes a lot of art house, artsy fartsy movies. This one's gritty and grainy and black and white and no name actors yet. I don't think he was big enough to have any really big actors, but I'm sure a film student would love it. 133, we got Under the Volcano. That's a John Huston movie. I didn't know he was still making movies into the 80s, but starring Albert Finney. And the title, Under the Volcano, makes it sound like it's going to be a disaster movie, but it's not. I think Albert Finney was nominated for an Oscar for this. He's dealing with alcoholism and craziness ensues, and would not have been a movie 12-year-old me would have wanted to see. 131 is another movie I've never heard of called Impulse with actor bingo. Here, I'll just do this. Bill Paxton. You got Meg Tilly, sister of Jennifer Tilly. She's in a lot of movies, not near as many as Jennifer Tilly, but also Tim Matheson. And I have no idea what it's about. 108, we have Once Upon a Time in America. Okay, we got to talk about this movie. It's like 4 hours long, and it's basically Robert De Niro does Scarface. Directed by Sergio Leone, who did all of the spaghetti westerns and stuff through the 70s. So it's basically Godfather made by Sergio Leone with Robert De Niro. It's sort of a middle ground between The Godfather and Scarface. But this movie's crazy. It stars Robert De Niro, like I said, James Woods, Hector Bingo, Elizabeth McGovern, I just mentioned her, Joe Pesci, I just mentioned him, Burt Young, who was the stepdad in the Rocky movies, Tuesday Weld, Treat Williams, Danny Aiello, William Forsythe, who is, it's true, this man has no dick. 97, we have The Pope of Greenwich Village with Mickey Rourke, Eric Roberts, and Daryl Hannah. For once, Mickey Rourke isn't playing the trouble. They're brothers, I think, and one of them gets in trouble with the mob or with the bookies or something, and for once Mickey Rourke isn't the one playing the troubled brother. He was good at those kind of roles. 89, we have Philadelphia Experiment. It was how can I describe that movie? You just got to look up Philadelphia Experiment. It's based on a true-ish story of the experiment that the government did where they supposedly sent a ship back in time, and when it came back, there was some of the soldiers were stuck between the walls, and obviously it's a big conspiracy theory, but it stars Michael Pare, who I talked about in the other video when I talked about Streets of Fire and Eddie and the Cruisers. He's a fun actor. Like I said, in the other video, he kind of reminds me of Eric Roberts a little bit. Just never had the takeoff on his career like he deserved. '84 is a movie I really want to talk about called Body Double. And I never realized it was a Brian De Palma movie. Brian De Palma was best friends with Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas and that whole zoetrope actors. Actually, George Lucas and Brian De Palma auditioned actors together in order to save money for Carrie and Star Wars. That's why there's audition tapes of Cindy Williams as Princess Leia, William Catt, who was casting Carrie, doing Luke Skywalker. Man, that was a lot of K's in that sentence. But this movie, Brian De Palma's Body Double, which is a weird movie I remember seeing late night on the Skinamax. And it was kind of an erotic thriller. It's basically, they took Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window and Vertigo and kind of stuffed them together, because the guy has real bad claustrophobia, which obviously plays into the story in places. And I won't get into the story too much, but basically the guy's down on his luck and meets a guy that offers to let him stay at his place, and there's a telescope that he can see into that building next door, and it's a woman dances seductively every night at a certain point, and eventually one night somebody comes in the house and kills her, and like I said, basically Rear Window. But neat movie. First movie I ever saw with Melanie Griffith. I forgot to write the guy's name down, but it's a guy that for 40 years I thought was Bill Maher, and it's not. But when you see, if you look it up and you'll see why I thought that was Bill Maher. I love that movie. Anyway, moving on. '83, Bo Derek in Bolero. Another one of those teenage late night spank bank movies. Sorry, that's crude, but it's true. Bo Derek was so super hot, and she is completely naked and has a ton of sex in this movie, and it's awesome. It's a terrible movie, but it's awesome. Next up, we have a movie called Country, which is the first of the Save the Farm movies, which I don't know how that's a genre, but there was 3 of them in the top movies this year. People were just into the Save the Farm movies. Country with Jessica Lange, Sam Shepard. I think they're basically trying to save the farm from the bank. 77, we have Broadway Danny Rose. That's a Woody Allen movie with Danny Aiello. God, he was in a lot of movies that year. Not my favorite Woody Allen movie. It's black and white, and it's kind of a comedy. I mean, a lot of Woody Allen movies are kind of comedies. But I don't know. I had it on one of them videotapes from my grandpa, and I watched it a bunch, but that one didn't really grow on me. Not one of my favorites. 72 is our next Save the Farm movies. The River with Mel Gibson and Sissy Spacek. Basically, the river is trying to take their farm out, so they're trying to build the levee and move the stuff and do all the things, and it's just drama and not my kind of movie. Moving on, Against All Odds. Is that called Against All Odds or Against the Odds? I think it's Against All Odds. About half the time when I write it down, I write Against the Odds and say Against the Odds. Maybe it's kind of like that Sex in the City thing, but it's Against All Odds. And I mentioned that one in the soundtrack video because that Phil Collins song is just phenomenal. The movie is long and boring. Jeff Bridges is always awesome, and James Woods is always just an asshole, just the greatest bad guy. And I couldn't remember then, but I remembered by now. The girl's name is Rachel Ward, and every time I look her up, I don't think she has anything else that really sparks interest that she did, but for some reason she's just super hot in this movie. 34 is Passage to India. I forgot to write anything down about that one, and I'm sure I'll regret that because I'm sure there was some reason why I put it on the list. 33 is Teachers, which I remember when that movie came out. I thought it might have been a kid's movie. 38 Special had the soundtrack song to it, but the kids in the movie are Crispin Glover, Ralph Macchio, Laura Dern. The teachers are Nick Nolte, Morgan Freeman, Lee Grant, Joe Beth Williams, Richard Mulligan, and Judd Hirsch. Jeez, I bet that's a good movie. And it just, that 33rd biggest movie of that year. And it just was not able to hold on to the zeitgeist at all. Nobody even remembers that movie. Number 25 is Killing Fields. That looked like an intense movie that I don't want to put in my brain. 24 is Places in the Heart. That's our last Save the Farm movie. And Sally Field is literally trying to save her farm from the bank. I think maybe Depression time or Civil War time, I don't even know. With Danny Glover, John Malkovich, Ed Harris, Amy Madigan, who's also in Streets of Fire, and Terry O'Quinn. He's a tough guy, bald guy that was in Lost like a million years after this. I didn't know he was in movies back then. I didn't know what movies he came from back then, but apparently there's him. So, that's all the serious, drama, regular movies. As far as 1984 goes, all I got left is horror, fantasy, sci-fi. I kind of blended all those together, and top 20. So if you stuck around this long, I appreciate you watching these long videos. It really, really helps me out. Try to like if you can. I never ask people to like because I never like videos. Come back for the next ones that I got coming up, and go back and binge some other stuff. If you stuck around this long, I'm sure I got some other stuff that you'll like too. So, all right, I'm out.